In the context of the church, the transfer of legacy involves the passing down of foundational values, beliefs, and practices from one generation to the next. It encompasses the transmission of spiritual teachings, cultural traditions, and organizational structures that have shaped the identity and mission of the Ekklesia over time. This transfer often occurs through formal instruction, mentorship, communal rites, rituals, and the lived example of leaders and elders within the faith community. It's essential for maintaining continuity, fostering spiritual growth, and ensuring the vitality of the church's missions across different epochs and societal contexts. This is Dr. Ray, and welcome to this week's Hosea International Speaks. We want to pick up where we left off last week in the governing patterns of the Ekklesia. The seventh and final governing pattern for the Ekklesia is the Ekklesia must be built for posterity and not for just position. Many of the churches are not set up for succession and the transfer of legacy, as most pastors believe they will live forever. When the senior pastor has established himself in Yahweh and in the ministry, he should start planning to transfer his baton in stages to the next generation of sons. When the succession mindset is in place, the senior pastor can scout for suitable candidates and teams for this process to begin. The Ekklesia is not just for one generation, understand this, but for transgenerational cycle to be set on course. The senior pastor must secure the covenant with Yahweh that will be transferable to their first generation sons and then their sons' sons. He must, through his commitment and sacrifice before Yahweh, to secure the promise and the pledge on the revealed future. The Ekklesia will then be set in the process that can be systematically strategized. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 16 and 18 through 21 states this very clear, at least when it comes to establishing a successor. Listen to what it says, and it's loaded with what has to be done for the church or what the individual is probably going through. For there is no lasting remembrance of the wise man as with the fool, inasmuch as in the coming days all will be forgotten, and how the wise man and the fool alike die. Thus I hated all the fruit of my labor for which I had labored under the sun, for I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise man or a fool. Yet he will have control over all the fruit of my labor, for which I have labored by acting wisely under the sun. This too is vanity. Therefore I completely despair of all the fruit of my labor, for which I had labored under the sun. When there is a man who has labored with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, then he gives his legacy to one who has not labored with them. This too is vanity and a great evil. With that said, what must the senior pastor or leader set up in order to secure Yahweh's words for the local Ekklesia? Number one, the senior founding leader must be brought to a mature capacity in his life and ministry. This is the Ekklesia must be impacted, the Ekklesia must be impacted and influenced by his lifestyle and ministry. He must be in a place where he is tapping into his greater potentials and rising consistently in the spiritual area or in spiritual stature. He must reach his potential and peak performance before he can be considered worthwhile investment into the lives of others. Surely he does not want to reproduce boy leaders, but mature men of stature who can create significant moves. We only produce from the best stock. and the senior pastor must be at his best when successions begin. Second area, the senior founding leader must decide how much and how fast he wants to transfer into the next generation of sons. The senior leader needs to know the kairos time to team up with teams of successors. It is not always possible to find one who can reproduce all that we are and have as founding fathers of the house. Sometimes we need to choose a team of successors who can carry a spectrum of what we carry. How much can be transferred will depend on how much the capacity of spirit and maturity of character the team of successors have. Since we know that it is not possible to transfer all immediately, we must strategically and consciously download little by little into the succeeding team. This would be more essential than transferring it too quickly before the team really reach maturity or when they lack the capacity. The third area is the teacher must know, the senior leader must know what he carries in Yahweh and what he wants to transfer. There are various dimensions of Yahweh that a founding father carries that can be transferred. Note, not everything that the founding father has within him can be transferred, or should I say, should not be transferred, especially the negative aspects. Yet, the sons that are under his administration or tutelage may at times see the negative side and may want to implement them, which may be a detriment to their own personal life as well as those around him. The dimensions of Yahweh warrants an intimate commitment, connection, community, and covenant in the relationship between the founding father, now I change to the apostolic leader, and the team successors. Most teams of successors do not look to these four dimensions of Yahweh, but only want to receive the transfer of operational dynamics of the meetings and the services. They're only prepared to take over these spiritual responsibilities of running the meetings of the Ekklesia. Sometimes they look to take over the meeting of the peoples in homes, in the hospitals, or in other specific meetings allotted during the week. But Yahweh has a higher purpose than these routine responsibilities when it comes to the transfer of the apostolic legacy in the house. Fourth, the senior pastor or the senior founder or apostolic leader now must accurately disciple and father this succeeding generation. The covenant relationship of trust, loyalty, and integrity is essential to this mentoring process. The team of successors must pass this test on covenant. They must score high on this aspect of covenant, as Yahweh is a covenant-making and covenant-keeping Yahweh. Those who walk and work with him must do so on the basis of the covenant. The covenant promises a better future, giving hope to the participants to allow us to pull together towards a common future. That's what this covenant does. When these relationships fail and are betrayed, all things in the legacy transfer will shut down in the spiritual realm. A perfect example was Gehazi, who was in line to receive the mantle from Elisha, but wound up receiving the mantle of Naaman, which was leprosy, instead. The fifth area, a senior founding father or apostle can mistaken legacy transfer to mean the natural. Legacy transfers involves that what Yahweh has formed and fashioned in our lives. It is this operational dynamics of our life that we must transfer into the next generation. When this takes place, the apostle will be remembered through his sons in succession as he carries what his father carried in his life and in his ministry. then the nature of the work and the future of the Ekklesia will progress. Why? Because it was placed in the senior apostle by Yahweh that is carried forward. If the founding apostle and the team of successors operate on a different frequency from each other, then there will be no connection of legacy or succession. Now, in order to be fair, there are some misconceptions about legacy transfer, and I'll just list them for you. The misconception, the reason for that is because there is a lot in there, so I will might even put it into the blog, and you might be able to read it down at the end. The misconception of legacy transfer is seen in 7 natural areas. Now, understand this, that none of these actually refer to the transfer of legacies, just misconception. The first one is the transfer of the senior pastor's pastoral responsibility. That actually speaks in itself. The second is the transfer of authority to lead and run the operations of the Ekklesia meetings and services. And I think we mentioned that just briefly in one of the headings there. And the third is the administration duties to coordinate and correlate all aspects of the life of the Ekklesia. And the fourth area of misconception is the spiritual administration of pastoral duties to meet needs. I think we also mentioned that briefly. The fifth is the management and maintenance of the physical and spiritual buildings and people. The sixth area is the resourcing of the Ekklesia with finances to move the church forward. That's a big area because sometimes finances could be used in the wrong way. And the seventh is the preceding word of Yahweh, which is given each week. Now, I'm only going to introduce this next session of what is true legacy transfer, and then conclude with the 7 steps of the true legacy with scriptural references, which you as the senior apostle or senior pastoral leader will want to go and research for yourself. What is true legacy transfer? True legacy transfer is more than the transfer of responsibilities and the duties of the senior pastor. It is not just taking his place or his position. It involves a power dynamic of the life of the Spirit and the word that operates in him. When the Ekklesia discovers this principle of transfer, we can raise a more powerful next generation to become the succeeding team. Most churches just replace the aging senior leader with a younger man who has a little more cutting edge charisma and people management skills. They do not always raise up someone in his place as a suitable representation of the senior leader. Sometimes they can replace the senior leader with a drastically different personality altogether. The chaos this will bring to what Yahweh has begun in the founding fathers would be unspeakable. We'll conclude this week's session by reading Ecclesiastes chapter 2, 18, 19, and 21. Thus I hated all of the fruit of my labor for which I had labored under the sun, for I must leave it to a man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool? We read this earlier. Yet he will have control over all the fruit of my labor, for which I have labored by acting wisely under the sun. This too is vanity. When there is a man who has labored with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, then he gives his legacy to one who has not labored with them. This too is vanity and a great evil. Well, I want to end this session with a very happy Mother's Day to all mothers out there. And because this weekend, when this comes out, this weekend will be Mother's Day. And if you have the privilege of being with her, you might just want to treat her with a meal at her favorite restaurant. Or at the videoing of this session, let me just say this, at the videoing of this session, my mother is alive and very well, and at the age of 92. And I will be visiting her this week. If your mother has gone on to her reward in heaven, you have the assurance that you will see her in the morning. If you enjoyed this week's session, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you have not yet subscribed, now is your time. And you can still give on Venmo or Cash App. This is Dr. Ray, and I'll see you next week on Hosea International Speaks.